It's no shock when I say that the world is broken. In fact, the West is broken. And being someone who is a UK citizen, a British citizen, born here, all of that kind of jazz there, obviously you know them ones you have to state it. I can clearly see where there's been changes, huge changes. And these changes are affecting the way we think, we behave, our visions for the future, etc., etc. Now, the times we're living in are very difficult. And if we're thinking about the sort of economic crises that we're facing at the moment, it's the worst since 2008. And I talk about 2008 like I was old enough to truly experience what happened. I don't think I was, if I'm honest with you. I must have been just before going to university or something to that degree. So I've heard about it. I've seen a movie, Big Short, all of that kind of jazz there. You know, the subprime sort of like mortgage offers that were low grade and available. And obviously there was going to be some sort of like pop or boom. But what we're facing feels a bit different. Naturally, because I'm older anyway. But it's not even just that. It's the fact that war is sort of like looming. Wars are happening, okay? But I'm talking about more direct within the West. You have taxation, which is very high. Interest rates are through the roof, which may be great for some investors and those who hold assets. But for those paying back credit or owning properties or whatever it may be, difficult situations. It's difficult for people to afford properties. You know, back 20 odd years ago, or whatever it was, you would pretty much see 4 times your salary in terms of the value of a property. And now you're looking at 10 times at least. And some may say, well, different times, you know, it's relative. It's not even relative because yes, we've seen in real terms, the sort of like that salaries go up, so to speak, but it hasn't been at the rate at which is required for it to feel as comfortable as it was all those years ago. So there's that to bear in mind as well. So why am I doing this video? I think I want to highlight some of the I was going to say the BS that is happening right now and sort of show some empathy towards it, but also things that we can do practically. And I have spoken about some of this stuff before. I'm not no financial advisor. Again, I talk about the consultant mindset, which is an individual who can strategically solve a specific problem for, I guess, an end client. In this instance, it's yourself, using certain frameworks or methodologies or good problem solving skills. And this is what we want to adopt and adapt. I'm going to be utilizing my notes just to sort of like prompt stuff. But as you'll know already, President Trump was elected on the 20th of January. I think it was inaugurated, so to speak, 2025. And he's just been moving nuts. You know, he's been writing executive orders and all this kind of stuff there. And one of those orders or one of those big changes that he's committed to is this whole tariff war stuff. And so he's put, I think it was 25% or 10% or whatever it may be on Canada and Mexico sort of like tariffs, and 20% on China. And of course, these countries are fighting back. I haven't heard much from Mexico, but they're fighting back and saying, hey, you can't do this X, Y, and Z. And Trump's like, yes, I can. In fact, if you add any tariffs onto our stuff, we'll just add it back. So the tariff wars begin. Now, of course, with this in mind, for us little leaguers within the UK, you know, we're sort of like puffing our chests and saying, hey, we need to be aware of this because this could affect us heavily. We have, you know, ties with the rest of Europe, but we're not in the EU, so we need to think about how do we sort of like support ourselves. And so there's been what has been known as a substantial threat to the UK economy warning set by the Bank of England that states that we need to prepare for any eventualities where things become more expensive. Now, I think Walmart was talking to the fact, and this is obviously for the States, that, you know, it could be as close as next week where you could see changes in prices to different things. Things that are imported from Mexico, as an example, and all this different stuff. So there is a real change that is happening, okay? And it could stop us from spending more. There are so many things that could happen to this. We've seen an impact when it comes to, again, reduced exports, changes to the stock market. I think the FTSE 100 dropped by however points it dropped, and there is an argument to say, well, how many people invest in the FTSE 100? You don't really hear that. You really hear that when it comes to the S&P 500, and I've seen a drop when it comes to that specific index fund. The point being made is there is volatility in the market, and there are going to be some drastic changes which creates a certain level of uncertainty and a certain level of expensiveness, if you want to call it that. Now, of course, with all of this stuff in mind, we have to also take into consideration some of the tax changes that have come into play. And of course, I'm only going to talk more confidently about the UK. Now, when Labour came into power via Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves was appointed the, Secretary of State for, our finances and everything else, the Exchequer. And essentially, part of the stuff that she spoke to is, number one, increasing employees' national insurance contributions from 13.8% to 15%. What does that really mean? Well, that could mean in real terms that it's harder to bring in more people, okay? Contractor, non-contractor, doesn't really matter, okay? Number two, it may mean that some organizations are less inclined to want to spend money because they may want to save costs. Number three, that helps the little person in the SME who, has salaried workers, even if it's 1, 2, or 3. And there's all of that to think about. And of course, if exports and imports and stuff are becoming more expensive, okay, based on tariffs and everything else, it's just a mess. It's just a complete mess. Cancel tax, I think it says bands B and D, okay, when it comes to homes, will increase by about 5%. And I think the national living wage will increase as well to £12.71 or 21, something to that degree. Again, don't verify the facts and figures from me. I'm just giving you the heads up so you can go and research it yourself. The point I'm making is there are some effects that are happening with the UK that were announced, okay, as part of their budget back in the winter budget. I think it was in October. In addition to that, those of you thinking, I need to leave the UK, all this kind of stuff there, fam, trust me, we're in the same boat. But the point being made is that there is this whole thing called domicile tax. So non-domiciled tax status is ending. And my understanding of this, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you are a British citizen and you're moving and shaking elsewhere, and you're making your income still and everything else, and you think that you're not going to pay tax and all that kind of stuff there to the UK government, you are mistaken now. From the 5th of April, that will no longer be the case. So I'm guessing you either revoke your citizenship or you pay up. So you can't escape. You cannot escape. And so this just makes things feel so squeezed and frustrating and annoying because everything becomes more expensive. You can't escape this. You feel like you can't escape this rat race. And it's almost like, what can you actually do? I'm going to throw in some more stats. So when it comes to job cuts, and I think I listened to this 2 days ago, for 5 consecutive months, we have seen job cuts within the labour markets. This is the worst since 2011. Like, just cuts because companies can't afford it. Things are getting more expensive. Things are becoming more difficult. And of course, when we're thinking about individuals who are not working between 16 to 24 years old, it's just under 1 million. It's roughly 987,000. It's a lot of people. So there is a real crisis in our hands. Now, with that in mind, from a UK standpoint, Labour, Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves, Angela Rayner, they all say, well, we pride ourselves in the public sector, hence why we have such high taxes, and that is sort of like the price you need to pay when it comes to being a UK citizen, a British citizen. But that would be based on the proviso that everyone agrees that actually our public services are on point. Now, this is not a criticism of the public services because I'm not quite a public servant, but I've worked for the NHS for a very long time. And, obviously for the last 4.5 to 5 years, I've worked in the capacity of a consultant / contractor working for places like the NHS and other places. And I tell you, people work extremely hard. People do, what needs to be done in order to provide value. But a point being made is there is a whole bunch of other people who will say that is still not enough. So even if that's not enough, why am I now contributing to a system that doesn't necessarily satisfy my standards or needs that are required? There'll be another bunch of people saying, oh, it's all these people coming into the country, all of this stuff, X, Y, and Z. But it's these same people who are supporting the NHS as well. So there is a back and forth. And there's going to be different arguments based on localities and regions that you're based in. I say this all to say that if you look at the budget, the autumn budget, there are certain areas and places and departments that are receiving more funding. Okay, so the NHS is one of them. Another place is the environment sector, I believe. Again, you can check the original report. And I want to say social care is not getting the same attention, but healthcare is. And there'll be a few others. And also, you know, if Keir Starmer is sticking to his word, he talks of the fact that he wants to really embed this whole great British energy, okay? Which is another thing to bear in mind in terms of opportunities. There's also things centered around AI and technology. That's going to be a big sector focusing on, especially the UK Silicon Valley being between Oxford, Cambridge and Milton Keynes. There is also this idea centered around security, especially with stuff that's happening with Ukraine, Russia, etc., where he wants to increase the defense budget by 2.5 to 3% over the next 4 to 5 years. So these are sort of like giving you ideas in terms of what areas become a focus. I say this very deliberately in terms of things that you can think about in terms of working opportunities or contractual opportunities, etc. But what can we do? Now, some of this is not applicable necessarily to the employed 9 to 5, but some of it is. So you're going to have to pick and choose. This is not in a specific order. This is just based on my notes. The first thing you want to do, at least anyway, especially if you are a consultant or contractor, is to maximize your tax efficiency. Okay, so what do I mean? So if you can, shift things into a limited company where you can have that tax efficiency. But this only makes sense if you have an accountant. Okay, so you have to pay up somewhere. And this accountant will give you so many different sort of like things to think about. Again, this is not a financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Speak to a financial advisor and or an accountant who is qualified and experienced to talk to you about that stuff. It's like I rehearsed it, but I didn't. Anyway, so they may suggest things like this. They may suggest things like get a self-invested private pension so that can minimize expenses and therefore not minimize expenses. It makes things more tax efficient because that is taken into consideration when you're being taxed as a business expense. There's also, I hope I'm saying that right, but again, you can confirm this. There's also the fact that you can take out a very small salary, which means that you can utilize the tax-free allowance up until its limit if you make a certain amount. And then the rest can be based on dividends, which means that, again, you'll be more tax efficient. You always want to file your expenses on a regular basis. So that's taking pictures of receipts, put it in your software, whether you're using, Xero or whatever it may be. And your accountant can account for these different business expenses. There's also other sort of elements as well where, again, your partner can be a director for the company. There are all these different things that can happen. But the point being made is just make sure you set yourself up for tax efficiency, and an accountant can help you with that. There's also the stocks and shares ISA and the cash ISAs. Now, there are some changes that may be happening, which is a bit frustrating. And there may be talk of the fact that actually the cash ISA is reducing from whatever it is now, I think it's 20,000 or 25,000, to a lower amount. Let's say it's 4,000, for example. Okay, that is annoying because it means now that actually you're moving from simple investing, if you want to call it that, if you could call it investing, to maybe having to do something that's a bit more technical for the majority of people, where you put money into a stocks and shares ISA instead. I haven't heard any changes around that, but again, rather than quote me on this stuff, on the 26th of March, you can watch the spring budget by Rachel Reeves for yourself, because that's where you're going to get your information, guys. I don't just say this off the top of my head. This is, well, Partly, yes, but this is from memory of watching the October one, and I've got a whole video centered on that stuff, so you can check it out for yourself. So really and truly, the point I'm making is that you have to start to educate yourself in terms of what is possible that could happen, but two, what are your options outside of that when it comes to an ISA situation. So that's that. The other thing, so that's all centered around sort of like tax efficiency. The other thing is around diversifying your income streams, which feels very difficult right now. And I'm not going to act like it's an easy thing to do. It can be difficult because you have to find an opportunity, you have to find a niche, you have to validate the audience, all of that kind of stuff there. It doesn't have to be so, but it can be like there has to be some sort of scientific approach to it to some degree. So again, if you are a consultant, as I've said before, if you have the consultant mindset, there are multiple different ways you can go about this. You can find outside of IR35 roles that are available. Okay, that's one. You can go on places like Upwork as a consultant to do work overseas, if that's a thing. You can check out other freelance marketplaces, such as Juno. That's an example. You can also, let's say, for example, check out non-executive director opportunities. Okay, so you can go on to type in like check the job boards on Google Jobs or dynamic boards or whatever it may be. You can check all these different places for those opportunities. There's also chances to make money through places like clarity.fm. That's an old school sort of like place where you can charge per minute based on your advice, okay, based on your expertise, and people will pay for this stuff. So obviously a lot of this stuff is service focused. Of course there are product focused stuff, but I'm only saying the service based stuff because it's quicker to set up. Okay, it's quicker for you to think about. So think about how you could seat yourself in those positions, and it is going to have to be stuff that you do after work, because the more money that you generate, the more opportunities you get in terms of spending it on things that you want to spend it on. And that may be on a home, that may be on clearing your mortgage, that may be on topping up your rent, that may be on whatever it is that makes sense for you to do. So that I'm not saying be crazy frugal, but there has to be sensibility to what you're doing. In addition to that, and it was interesting, I saw a comment the other day saying that the money's not in stocks, it's in real estate. Okay, that's fair enough. If that's your experience, that's perfectly fine. But I'm not going to knock stocks, because that has worked not just for myself, but for other people. And so what I would say is that if you do believe in stocks or you understand the potential of it, then definitely look at these opportunities when it comes to index funds. To keep it simple, S&P 500. Okay, that's it. If you want to be more riskier, then look at tech or health tech or ed tech, or whatever it may be, sort of like stocks to look at. And again, this is not investment advice, but again, you can check out, just think about the trends. Okay, think about who's controlling the AI race. Think about who's controlling sort of like things centered around the AI race. Also think about other novel things that are happening in health. Like, just be sensible about it and invest in things that you probably use every day. So if you use ChatGPT every day, is there something related to ChatGPT that you can invest in? Some people would say Nvidia, some people would say X, Y, and Z, whatever it may be. You can look at that stuff. And I say that because there is also the opportunity to invest in high growth stocks. But of course, where there's high growth, there is a high probability of the markets falling for that specific stock. But then the argument would also be that actually, well, that's the risk that you make. And of course, if it falls, then it's on discount, because naturally all these companies are doing well anyway, and over time they will grow. So again, you have to balance it for yourself, and you have to decide whether you want to go down the route of stocks that are accumulating by nature. Okay, so just, it's reinvested over time, or they're distributed, i.e. you get dividends from them, you get payouts. Okay, of course you need to research the reliability of these payouts and all that kind of stuff there, and how frequent all of that stuff is. So that's in terms of hard assets, so to speak. There are things like property as well. I don't have much experience in it apart from a 1 to 2 year property investing course that I did years ago. And property will always be a thing, but in the UK I'm just a bit suspicious. I've always had this theory where at some point I believe that the state whatever it may be, the government will take back all the properties, buy them back, and no one can own at any point. When that will happen, I have no idea. Is that a conspiracy theory? Yes. But the way it's going, I can see why that would happen, because, on average, they say, properties double every 5 to 7, 7 to 10 years, Has that been a perfect science? No, but on average, that's what it looks like. And if we can't afford them now, fam. I was talking to my friend who is a solicitor, property solicitor, and he was telling me that they're making changes to stamp duty thresholds from £425,000 for a property to £300,000, which basically means if you're a first-time buyer, then you have to start paying stamp duty if your property is worth over 300k. And I think for those who already have a property and are buying their second, third or fourth home, that threshold has gone down from 250k to 125k again. It's just, hey man, if you do the calculations, you go mad. So you have to be very sensible with your approach and what you're doing and calculating all the hidden costs. The other thing I'll say, this is specifically for contractors. This may even be applicable to fixed term and maybe some sort of like permanent members of staff. If you're in an environment that you can bear, okay, and this I only say in times that are not thriving, times that are difficult, times that are closer to a recession, then think about if there are other sort of like opportunities and ways you can sort of like extend your time there. Number one, can you get paid up front? Okay, is there a way to get 12 months up front in terms of your sort of like payment from them? Number two, is there an opportunity for you to negotiate your sort of like contracts with them? So this is something that it's not really a trick, but it's something that I do. It makes sense always to find out whether there is more work that you can do, not for the sake of doing work, but because there is actually more value that you can provide. You need to, provide as much value as possible before you exit. And obviously in a time like this, it makes sense to do that because it means that you are consistently on your retainer and or payment cycle from your end client as a consultant or contractor. So this is where a month and a half beforehand, 2 months before, 1 month before, you have that conversation. You just say to your hiring manager or the person that you've dealt with, the economic buyer, so I've really enjoyed my time here and I believe that I've provided, X value, and you can talk about what value that is. And, you believe that you can provide more value that looks like this, that, and that. You lay out the plan for them. Is this something that you would agree with? And you see what they say. And if it's a conversation that needs to be had where you're coaching them in terms of what value is provided, obviously not lying because you'll get found out, then there is more of an opportunity for you to extend your contract and provide more value how you need to. So this is why I say you have to be good at capturing and articulating your value. I don't just say this for banter. There is a reason behind why I say it. So think about how you can extend your contract, so to speak. But also, if you are let go, are there opportunities for you to be in a more quote unquote recession-proof sector? And this is where I spoke about healthcare, AI, defense, maybe energy, all of this kind of stuff. It's important to check all of this jazz. Other things that which is kind of like self-explanatory. If you can negotiate any sort of like expenses that you have, negotiate that stuff. My wife is the chief of this. She went from paying £20 a month to like £6 a month for her phone contract. Don't ask me how, but she's been paying £4 to £6 for years. I don't know how she does it. She probably needs to do a YouTube video on that, but knowing her, she'll be like, yeah, I just asked them. But anyway, so there's that. So can you negotiate anything? Can you cut anything? And this is why it's important for you to check your expenses. By the way, as you're listening to me say all this stuff, it sounds like a lot. And that's because it is. This is not some small stuff. You need to dedicate time to do it. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat dedicate some time to do this. Because if you do, you'll be better off, I'm telling you. Does it mean you're going to be, running down the yellow brick road and at the end of the rainbow there's going to be a pot of gold? Not necessarily, but it does mean you at least survive. But we're not trying to just survive, we thrive. Okay, so it's trying to tee you up so you can thrive. Also, are there any opportunities to refinance any loans to reduce the interest rates? Can you consolidate anything? Are there opportunities to pay off credit cards quicker? Like, get that done quickly, aggressively. I don't do this whole thing where I long it out for like 6 to 24 months. Why? I get why. Enjoyment, life, things are happening. But for me personally, I like to pay that stuff quick. Okay, so maybe you have to be aggressive with it, which means compromising, soft life for 2 months or 3 months. In the grand scheme of things, if it means that you have more in your pocket and you can do more soft life afterwards, then great. But recognize the times that we're in. Also, you just want to sort of like track what's happening with the economy, specifically within your country, and also like what opportunities there are outside of this country. So remote opportunities, digital opportunities, etc., etc. What I will continue to say is that, and you may not know the reason why, but having a strong online personal brand can be useful when it comes to negotiating, influencing, providing potential opportunities, creating potential opportunities when it comes to products and services, etc., etc. So find something or a number of things that you want to talk about. Just be yourself and talk about it. I'm not necessarily a finance expert by any means, but I'm a human being that wants to make more money, likes making money, and wants others to make more money. So why I talk about this stuff. And my vehicle for doing this is allowing people to understand that actually when it comes to their career, they create it as opposed to just, follow or pursue a career, And I'm not knocking that bit, but I'm trying to create an expansive mindset so people understand that it's possible. And not because it's possible as a hopeful, ethereal thing that some people seem to think that is the case. It's because I'm actually doing it, and there are other people who are actually doing it as well. And so we're all on this progressive journey towards creating this career that we're looking for. If I wasn't doing this, I would have just stuck where I was, back in the NHS, which was doing what it was doing. It had its sort of like goal in mind. But I knew there was more for me to do in my mind in terms of what I wanted to create. And hence why I've gone down this whole contracting consulting route, in addition to doing the other stuff centered around coaching and mentoring. But your journey may not look like that at all. So it's about defining what this feels like. It is clear to me, especially even in terms of people clicking on my videos and stuff, that people are thinking heavily about money. No shit, Sherlock. Of course they are. They're thinking about making more money, saving more money, maintaining their money, anything indirectly linked to them. Like, it's all about the money. But at the same time, how you surface that money and manage that money is based heavily on your psychology, your established set of attitudes, your mindset, your behaviors, all of that kind of stuff there. So I don't want to sort of like forget that kind of stuff. So think to yourself, based on everything I've highlighted, what can I do to put myself in a stronger position? What do I need to do in the short term, in the midterm, and the longer term? Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, I've got a little quote here. Okay, it's a closing quote, so to speak. Uncertainty creates opportunity. By acting now, you can turn this crisis into your advantage. That feels a bit like, oof, can I? Well, advantage may be a strong word, but what I can say is that you can use this opportunity to learn more about your situation and understand how you can better position yourself, because then there may actually be some opportunities or advantages that you highlight. This may be the kick up the bum that you need. Okay, so really, to recap in a nutshell, like, understand your financial position, determine whether you can become more tax efficient, be very clear about what you can save in terms of like what you're spending already, see if there are any additional opportunities to conservatively make money, and also, I guess, in a non-conservative way, a more liberal way, and just be vigilant. Just be very clear about what's happening in the global space for your benefit only. Okay, it's not about fear mongering, but it's for your benefit only. So hopefully that has given you some insight and some things to think about. If you've got any specific comments that you want to make, then feel free to make the comments below. Make them constructive, make them positive and good energy. That's always useful. Again, if you ever want your CV or LinkedIn reviewed, then you can check out michaeltavarani.com and check the services bit, and then again you can put in your request for that. If you want to have a one-to-one in order for you to again be coached on some of this stuff, then we can have a conversation centered around that and see how we can partner together to make you become a better individual. But again, above all of that stuff, I really appreciate your time watching this. If you want to see more videos centered around portfolio careers, leadership, resilience, the whole shebang, then don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.